Hey guys, tonight we begin with a restless sky, a moody thunder god, and a feeling you probably shouldn't ignore, that someone, somewhere, just woke up very, very annoyed. You're lying flat on a slab of stone that's warm from the afternoon sun, but overhead, the clouds have started to mumble. Not quite thunder, more like an ominous grumble from a stomach that skipped breakfast. You sit up slowly. The wind smells like salt and wet moss, and there's a tension in the air that even the birds are pretending not to notice. And then you hear it. A voice, not loud, but heavy. It rumbles like a distant waterfall trying to whisper. You look around, and yes, of course, it's Thor. Stomping through the mist with his eyebrows tangled and his hands clenched like he's ready to strangle a tree. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of Midgard. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't exactly approach Thor. He tends to attract lightning when he's frustrated. But you follow at a safe distance, watching him mutter something about the serpent again and the sea being too smug lately. Classic Thor, picking fights with elemental forces because he forgot where he put his patience. You trail him past crooked boulders and glowing mushrooms, through a clearing where the wind stops just long enough for you to hear him mutter a name, Jormungandr. You try saying it under your breath and immediately regret it. It feels like a wet eel slid across your tongue. Thor is clearly brooding. You recognize the signs. Last time, he lifted a mountain by accident just to prove a philosophical point. This time? Well, this time it seems to involve a fishing trip. Which is strange, because Thor doesn't fish. He smashes. He throws. He yells. But fishing? That requires patience, bait, and a certain gentle finesse that doesn't pair well with thunder-based problem-solving. So why the sudden urge to go angling? As he stomps past a shivering pine tree, you spot Loki sitting cross-legged on a rock, eating what looks like charred honey bread. He's smiling in that way only someone completely immune to consequences can smile. Fishing, you whisper. Loki shrugs. Better than therapy, he says with a wink. Now you're starting to see the bigger picture. Something about Thor's dreams lately, something about a serpent large enough to wrap around the world. And maybe, just maybe, Thor's starting to think he needs to deal with that snake before it deals with him. You keep walking, stepping carefully over roots that seem to slither just a little too eagerly beneath your boots. Thor stops by a moss-covered tree and squints toward the horizon. "I'll need a big hook," he grumbles, "and something bigger for bait." Loki licks honey off his thumb and casually says, "We could ask Hymir. He's got a boat." Thor rolls his eyes. "That giant hates me." Loki smiles wider. "Exactly. You don't know if it's bravery, foolishness, or just the inevitability of mythological logic, but Thor agrees. The clouds overhead clap once, like an impatient teacher, and Thor strides forward, muscles tense, jaw locked, and an idea so odd it might just qualify as divine inspiration. Fishing. For a sea serpent. With a rope. And a cow head. You sigh and follow, because honestly, what else were you going to do tonight? You wake up the next morning on the edge of a cliff, with seagulls judging you and Thor already halfway through a one-sided argument with the sky. He's wearing his travel frown. That's the one where his eyebrows try to merge, and his cape keeps snagging on tree branches because he refuses to walk around anything. You sit up, stretch, and try to ignore the fact that you fell asleep on a rock shaped exactly like your spine. Loki is already nearby, doodling serpents in the dirt with a stick and humming some annoying sea shanty. You give him a look that says, "Please don't make this worse." He grins and immediately starts whistling louder. "So," you say, trying to sound casual, "we're just going to show up at a giant's house and ask to borrow his boat?" Thor doesn't even turn around. "Yes." "That's it." "Yes." Loki chimes in. "Well, I also suggested we bring pastries, but apparently diplomacy isn't in today's forecast." You begin walking toward Hymir's place, which, true to Norse architectural humor, is located somewhere cold, remote, and up an unreasonable number of hills. The sky shifts between blue and charcoal gray as if it's trying to decide whether to help or hinder your quest. Thor doesn't seem concerned. He's humming. You don't like that. Nothing good ever happens when Thor hums. Eventually, after a few too many avalanches narrowly avoided and one incident involving an elk with questionable social boundaries, you reach the cliffs overlooking Hymir's Hall. It's a gloomy structure built out of what looks like whalebone and bad decisions. A waterfall crashes beside it, not majestically, but more like it's angry it was asked to participate in the landscape. As you approach, the front door groans open all by itself. "Nope," Loki says. "That's definitely haunted." Thor walks straight in. Inside, it's warmer than expected. You see giant-sized mugs, a cauldron big enough to take a nap in, and, wait, no cauldron. Just a circle where dust used to gather. Interesting. Then Hymir appears. And by appears, we mean he materializes in that classic giant way, by making you feel very small and very likely to be turned into soup if you say the wrong thing. He's got the look of someone who knows his best days are behind him and blames most of that on Thor. Hymir growls, voice like a glacier cracking, "Ate my goat stew last time and cracked my best mug." Thor nods. "Also, I need your boat." You consider hiding behind Loki, but he's already behind you. Surprisingly, Hymir doesn't say no. He just scowls deeper and mutters something about gods and their dumb hobbies. "But if you break anything again," Hymir adds, "you're doing my taxes." You're not sure what kind of taxes a sea giant pays, but it doesn't sound fun. As you look around the hall, you notice the walls are carved with stories, some familiar, some utterly baffling. One appears to show a cat lifting a mountain. Another shows Thor fishing with a tree. You point. "Has he tried this before?" Loki leans in. "Oh yeah, that time he brought breadsticks instead of bait. Didn't go well." Suddenly, the room goes quiet. Hymir clears his throat and asks, "Do you at least have proper bait?" Thor shrugs. "Not yet." Loki, without missing a beat, says, "We'll find a cow on the way." Hymir sighs. "Fine. The boat's in the fjord. Don't get it cursed." You thank him politely while Thor grabs an entire barrel of salted fish, just in case. You're not sure whether it's for the serpent or for snacking. Probably both. As you leave the giant's home, Loki turns and winks at you. You know, most people just go bowling for stress relief. You're beginning to realize this is going to be much weirder than expected. You've barely stepped out of Hymir's hall when Thor announces, "We'll need a cow." You pause mid-step. "A cow." Thor nods solemnly, as if this is the most reasonable statement anyone has ever made before embarking on a fishing trip. Loki raises an eyebrow. Preferably one with a head. Just the head, really? And that's how you find yourself wandering the tundra, looking for livestock while Loki hums ominously and Thor punches a tree, allegedly for warmth. You're beginning to suspect that Norse fishing rituals are less about calm patience and more about emotionally displacing your rage onto foliage. Eventually you spot it. A lone, unfortunate-looking cow grazing near a creek, blissfully unaware of its mythological importance. You consider suggesting an alternative, a large cheese wheel, maybe, but one look at Thor's face tells you that this is not a flexible situation. Scholars still argue, Loki mutters, whether this cow was enchanted, volunteered, or just had spectacularly bad timing. Thor doesn't ask. He declares, "This one will do." The cow looks up, sniffs, and walks directly into Thor's open arms, as if it, too, has accepted that its fate was sealed the moment it was born near a thunder god. You look away as Thor takes care of the necessary preparations. Loki distracts you with facts about sea serpents, including one about how Jormungandr's teeth allegedly glow in the dark and hum a lullaby when the moon is full. You make a mental note never to test that. Now armed with bait, if we can call it that, You follow the gods down a winding path to the fjord where Hymir's boat waits like a sulking walrus, heavy, lumpy, and not at all interested in leaving its spot. The vessel is absurdly large. The oars are the size of small trees. Thor lifts one with a grunt, and Loki immediately announces he's more of a steering consultant than a rower. You're assigned balancing duty, which mostly involves sitting in the middle and trying not to die. As you all shove off from shore, the boat creaks like it's having second thoughts. The water is oddly calm. Mist clings to the surface like spilled milk across a dark table. You can't see the bottom. You hope that's because it's deep, and not because something big is blocking the light. Loki starts humming again. Thor glares at him. Do you have to? Loki shrugs. It's a sea shanty. For luck. The shanty, to your horror, includes lyrics like, "Oh mighty eel, don't eat my leg," and, "If I'm digested, please be quick." Thor grunts. Less singing. More rowing. You pass chunks of ice floating like forgotten thoughts. Seagulls cry overhead. One lands on Loki's head and refuses to leave. Loki pretends it's a crown. Eventually, you reach what Thor calls the drop. It's a patch of ocean that looks exactly like every other patch, except for the fact that your stomach suddenly feels 10 feet lower. There's no sound, no birds, no waves, just breathless quiet. This is the place, Thor says. Loki peers over the edge. That's a whole lot of nope. Thor ties the cow head to the rope. Well, rope is generous. It looks like woven lightning and old anger. You hold it briefly and feel your fingertips buzz. He casts the bait into the depths. Nothing happens. Then the rope twitches. Then it pulls. You brace yourself as the boat groans under the strain. Thor's muscles bunch like storm clouds. Loki stops joking. Even the seagull flies away. Whatever's down there, it's big, very big, and it's rising. The rope jerks again, hard enough to knock you sideways into Loki, who only barely catches you, grumbling something about being used as an airbag. Thor doesn't budge. He's planted his feet wide, fists wrapped around the line, arms shaking not from fear, but from thrill. You realize, with mild horror, that he's actually enjoying this. A bubble the size of a cottage breaches the surface. It pops with a hiss that smells like wet stone and forgotten nightmares. The water churns in wide circles, like it's being stirred by an invisible ladle. Somewhere below, something moves. Slowly, deliberately. It breaks the surface. Jormungandr. A serpent so massive, it doesn't rise, it unfolds. Scales the size of shields glisten in dull blue and green, each one etched with what looks suspiciously like runes, or maybe just very organized barnacles. Its eyes breach next, glowing faintly, wide as wagon wheels, and disappointingly unimpressed. It looks tired. Loki squints. Maybe it just wanted a nap? Thor roars, yanking the line as if he's hauling in a mildly stubborn whale. The boat tilts. You clutch the side and try not to think about how bad an idea all of this is, especially the part where you didn't bring a life vest or a prayer. Do you even have a plan? You yell. Thor answers with a grunt. Loki answers with a shrug. Neither of which comforts you. The serpent opens its mouth, not to roar, but to yawn. A massive, echoing yawn that carries across the fjord like 1,000 librarians sighing at once. It then blinks, slowly, as if it's trying to remember what it was doing before being rudely interrupted by a cow head and a thunder god. The line tightens. The boat groans. A wave sloshes over the edge, soaking your boots and depositing something that might be a fish or a lost shoe. Hard to tell. Scholars still argue, Loki whispers, whether Jormungandr was truly aggressive or just dealing with cosmic indigestion. You don't get time to ponder. The serpent pulls back. Thor digs in. The muscles in his arms look like they're trying to declare independence. Loki, after loudly announcing he refuses to die soggy, grabs a bucket and starts bailing. Then, something unexpected happens. Jormungandr stops pulling. It rises higher. Now its head is fully out of the water, and for one surreal moment, it and Thor just stare at each other. Silent, suspicious, possibly confused. Then, of all things, the serpent tilts its head. Not a threatening movement, more like curiosity. Thor freezes. You stare. Loki, still bailing, says, "You know, if it talks, I'm leaving." And it does. Not in words. Not out loud. But you feel something deep inside your mind, like a thunderclap made of vowels and ocean sounds. A presence. It's asking a question? You can't quite make out the meaning. But it feels less like, "I will destroy you," and more like, "Why are you doing this?" Thor looks stunned. For once, he doesn't yell, doesn't swing, doesn't threaten. He listens. You look at Loki, who is just as stunned. Did Thor just hesitate? Loki nods slowly. Write this down. It might never happen again. You can't look away. Thor, actual Thor, is just standing there, rope in hand, muscles tense, and thinking. That alone is more unsettling than the giant serpent eyeing you like you're a mildly interesting seashell. Somewhere in the distance, a gull coughs. The water hushes again. Jormungandr doesn't lunge, doesn't hiss, doesn't even blink. It just drifts, rising and falling with the current like it's waiting for a better reason to be here. The rope sags slightly in Thor's grip. Loki squints. So, are we fishing, chatting, or surrendering? You don't know. Thor doesn't either, clearly. He's not used to enemies blinking calmly instead of attacking with claws or fire or emotional manipulation. This is confusing him in ways no hammer ever has. And then, because Thor never lets a moment linger too long, he yanks the rope again. Jormungandr snorts. It's a low, rumbling sound that makes your toes go numb. Not aggressive, just irritated, like you interrupted its bubble bath. The serpent dips under the surface for a second, and the boat lurches. You slide across the deck and bump into the cowhead bucket, which, for reasons you don't care to explore, is still bleeding. You decide not to look closely. Thor plants his feet again. It's pulling. You want to yell, maybe don't let it, but you're too busy clinging to a nail in the floorboard like it's a sacred artifact. The boat starts spinning. Not fast. Just enough to unsettle your organs. The rope goes taut. Too taut. You all freeze. Loki whispers, you felt that too, right? Thor grunts. Anchor's caught. You blink. What anchor? Thor looks around. Loki raises a finger. Did we forget to tie off the other end? You all follow the rope to its end, which is now dragging something up from the depths. And it's not just the serpent. It's something else. Beneath Jormungandr's drifting bulk, a shape starts to rise. Not alive. Not moving. The platform? A stone altar? The boat? It breaches the surface with a slurp, like the sea reluctantly giving up a secret. It's Hymir's cauldron. Wait, you say, isn't that the missing cauldron from his haul? Thor blinks. I thought he sold it. Loki laughs. He lost it. Now we know where. You stare at the absurdly large cooking pot floating just beneath the serpent's belly. Barnacles cling to its sides. Seaweed waves from its handles like forgotten hair. Jormungandr glances at it, then at Thor. Let's go. Just like that, the rope goes slack. The boat rocks gently. The serpent submerges without fuss. No dramatic final splash. Just gone. You stare into the waves, heart pounding, while Thor reels in the rope with oddly calm hands. Scholars still argue, Loki murmurs, if the serpent meant to return the cauldron, or just got bored. You breathe again. Not because you're safe, but because, somehow, that felt like an agreement. A very, very old one. Thor says nothing. He just nods at the sea like two gladiators acknowledging a draw. You're not sure if this was a success, a truce, or a weird scavenger hunt, but you survived. And now, apparently, you're taking a cauldron home. Word count, 1067. The cauldron sits in the middle of the boat like it owns the place. It's too big to ignore and too heavy to lift. Thor tried, of course, twice. The first time the boat tilted dangerously. The second time, the cauldron made a noise like a whale clearing its throat and refused to budge. So now it just sits there, dripping seawater and ancient secrets, while everyone pretends that hauling it up from the bottom of the ocean wasn't completely unplanned. You glance over the edge of the boat. The waves have gone calm again, eerily calm. No sign of Jormungandr. Just silence, broken only by the occasional creak of wood or Loki whistling what he insists is a tide charm, and not just a song about soup. Thor stares at the cauldron like it insulted his beard. "I knew it would come back," he says. "No, you didn't," Loki replies. Thor glares. "Well, I hoped." You watch him tighten the last coil of the magical rope, now suspiciously warm and smelling faintly of burnt mint, and stow it beside the cauldron. He's clearly trying to decide whether this whole adventure counts as a win. "Let me guess," you say. "We're giving that back to Hymir?" Thor shrugs. "Eventually." You're about to ask what eventually means in God time when the boat jerks. Not from below, but from above. You look up. A seagull. Just one. Perched on the very tip of Thor's hammer handle, balancing impossibly well, and looking deeply judgmental. It caws once, poops on the edge of the cauldron, and flies off. Loki claps. "A blessing. We are truly favored." Thor growls and wipes the rim with his cloak. You wonder if that breaks any divine hygiene rules. The boat begins its slow return. Thor rows with measured strokes, quiet now, contemplative. You sit near the cauldron and trace the strange patterns carved into its surface: vines, stars, what might be a goat tap dancing. It hums faintly, as if holding in a burp. You decide not to touch it again. "Do you think the serpent knew?" you ask. Thor doesn't answer. Loki does. Everything in the sea knows. Especially the things we try to forget. That doesn't help. As the shoreline appears through the mist, you spot Hymir standing like a very disappointed mountain. His arms are crossed. His beard is wet. His expression says, "Please tell me you didn't just bring back that cursed pot I got rid of on purpose." You dock the boat slowly. Hymir stomps forward. "Is that what I think it is?" Thor grins. "You're welcome." Loki steps in front of the cauldron, arms wide. "We found it during spiritual exploration. You dropped it in the sea 200 years ago." Hymir roars. Thor scratches his beard. "Did I?" "Yes." You whisper to Loki, "He definitely did." The giant peers into the pot. Recoils slightly. It smells like regret. Loki beams. "So does Thor most days?" You step back as the gods bicker. Something about usage fees and emotional compensation and the price of mythical cookware in a post-Serpent economy. You don't bother intervening. This is clearly above your pay grade. Instead, you find a rock, sit down, and stare out at the waves. They ripple gently now, like nothing ever happened. But you know better. You felt the moment the rope tightened. You saw the stare between god and monster. You watched as a cauldron emerged from nowhere, trailing barnacles and unspoken history. And somewhere, down below, the serpent is still there. Still watching. Still waiting. Later that evening, the fire crackles low, and Thor is busy roasting something suspiciously unidentifiable over a spit. You're fairly certain it's not from the sea, but you're not willing to bet your nap on it. Loki is lounging nearby, flipping a coin made entirely of ice and grinning like someone who knows 5 versions of the truth and refuses to confirm any of them. Hymir, still fuming over the return of his cauldron, has retreated to his hall, grumbling about divine clutter and property law. You're not sure whether he'll store it or bury it again. Meanwhile, you're sitting on a rock, trying to make peace with the part of your mind that saw a god almost make friends with a world-ending serpent. It's not easy. You've barely processed the cow head. Thor, surprisingly mellow, turns the spit and mutters, "It didn't want to fight." You glance over. "Jormungandr." He nods. "Then why did you bring the rope? The bait? The flexing?" Thor shrugs. "Sometimes you have to show up. just in case. You want to argue that this sounds less like strategy and more like aggressively winging it, but something about the firelight reflecting in his eyes makes you pause. It looked at me, he says softly. Not like a beast. Like a brother. You blink. That's a lot. Loki throws a pine cone into the fire. He says that about everyone. Said the same thing about a bear once. It ate his lunch. Thor grunts. Still felt like kin. You stretch your legs and lean back on your elbows, eyes drifting toward the stars. The sky is unusually clear now, black velvet scattered with pinholes. Somewhere overhead, a streak of silver cuts across the night. Make a wish, Loki says. But keep it vague. The gods are notoriously literal. You close your eyes, breathe in the pine smoke, and wonder, not for the first time, how exactly you ended up part of this mess. Scholars still argue, Loki murmurs, whether Jormungandr was meant to end the world or just test its patience. You nod slowly. That did feel like a test. One where no one won, no one lost, and everyone left with something mildly confusing in their pockets. Thor interrupts your thoughts by handing you a chunk of roasted something. It smells decent. You eat it before asking. Big mistake. Tastes like shoe? Thor beams. Boar foot. Loki winces. Correction. Left boar foot. He stepped in something. You put the meat down discreetly. Thor laughs. A deep, satisfied thunder rumble of a laugh that rolls across the hills. For a moment, everything feels oddly peaceful. No looming disasters. No ancient serpents. Just gods being weird and firelight on stone. And then, in the silence between stories, you hear it. A low splash. Far off. Barely there. But unmistakably watching. You meet Loki's eyes. He nods. Still out there. Thor doesn't flinch. Let it watch. And you? You pull your cloak tighter, let the fire warm your toes, and try to convince your overactive imagination that sometimes a splash is just a splash. You wake just before dawn, wrapped in your cloak, with dew settling on your boots and the lingering scent of roasted boar foot still haunting your dreams. The fire's out. Loki's gone. Thor's snoring under a pine tree, flat on his back, as if the world has never contained stress or sea serpents. For a moment, everything is calm, until you spot it. On the edge of the lake, balanced on a pile of wet stones, sits a single fish. Not flopping, not gasping, just sitting, watching you. You blink. It blinks back, then flops once, and disappears with a plop that feels way too timed to be random. You don't wake Thor. What would you even say? Hey, a suspiciously thoughtful fish is stalking me? Instead, you go looking for Loki. You find him exactly where you expect, in Hymir's pantry, stealing pickled mushrooms and rearranging spice labels to cause chaos. Did you sleep? You ask. He raises an eyebrow. Define sleep. You sigh. The serpent's still watching, isn't it? Loki shrugs. It's got a good memory. You pull on its face, it tends to remember. You lean against the doorframe, eyeing a jar labeled fire salt. That's definitely not where it used to be. Are we safe? You ask. Loki laughs. Safe? Oh, sweet sleep-deprived mortal. You're traveling with Thor. Safety left 3 villages ago. You narrow your eyes. I meant from Jormungandr. He pauses. Just for a second. Then shrugs. We weren't in danger. Just in proximity to possibility. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. You rejoin Thor near the still crackling embers of last night's fire. He's chewing on something leathery and humming again, which now feels like an unofficial storm warning. What now? You ask. Thor wipes his mouth. We take the cauldron back. You frown. Didn't we already do that? He points at it. It's still sitting in the boat. No one, not even Hymir, has moved it. Return, Thor clarifies. Properly. To where it belongs. You tilt your head. Which is? Thor doesn't answer. Loki appears with a satchel full of stolen snacks. "We're going back," he says cheerily. "To the sea." You groan. "I thought we were done." "Done?" Loki smirks. "With Norse mythology? We haven't even gotten to the part where the boat develops feelings." You don't ask what he means. You're too tired. Instead, you help Thor reload the cauldron. This time it feels heavier, not just in weight, but in intent, like it wants to go somewhere. Thoros. You bail. Loki narrates the journey like a nature documentary, but with more sarcasm. And halfway across the fjord, the fog returns. Not the casual kind. The deliberate kind. It curls around the boat like a blanket with opinions. You clutch your cloak tighter. Then the boat stops. Not bumps. Not drifts. Stops. Dead still. On water that should be moving. Thor looks up. It's time. And from beneath the surface, ripples. Something is coming. You hold your breath, not because it helps, but because it feels like the only thing left under your control. The water doesn't rise. It simply yields, parting in a slow spiral as if the sea itself is taking a deep inhale. Then from the mist comes the glow. Not light exactly. More like pressure wrapped in luminescence. A pulse. A signal. Like a blinking eye behind a curtain. Loki leans over the edge of the boat, squinting. I think it's sending us a vibe. You try not to panic. The cauldron hums faintly again, vibrating beneath your feet like a kettle ready to confess its sins. Thor says nothing. He grips the edge of the boat, eyes fixed forward, jaw set in that unique blend of divine determination and reckless optimism. Then you see it. Jormungandr rises again. But not like before. This time it doesn't breach violently or hiss dramatically. It glides. Effortless. As if it's moving through time, not water. And on its head, balanced with absurd precision, is a single seashell, spiraled, pinkish, glistening like it was polished by moonlight. Loki gasps. It brought a gift. Thor frowns. Or a challenge. You squint at the shell. Or a fashion statement? The serpent stops just feet from the boat. It lowers its gaze, not threatening, not sleepy this time, but curious. Then it moves. Not toward you. Toward the cauldron. With delicate precision that defies its size, Jormungandr lifts the cauldron in its coils. Not to steal it. Not to swallow it. Just to carry it. You all stare in stunned silence. Scholars still argue, Loki murmurs, if this was a sacred ritual, or just the world's most passive-aggressive handoff. The serpent dips beneath the waves again, gently cradling the cauldron like it's returning a borrowed teacup. The boat drifts in a lazy circle, caught in the serpent's wake. You hear no words, but you feel something. A parting thought. An ancient presence brushing against your mind with the gentleness of sea foam. That which nourishes must be protected. And then it's gone. Just like that. No splash. No wave. Just stillness. The cauldron is gone too, back to the deep, or wherever ancient world serpents store their kitchenware. Thor exhales like he's been holding that breath since yesterday. Loki wipes a single tear. You're not sure if it's genuine or a sea spray-related performance. The boat rocks once more, then stills. What just happened? You ask softly. Thor shrugs. Respect. Loki nods. Or very elaborate food storage. You stare into the fog. Somewhere out there, a myth just rewrote itself. And you were there for it. The fog slowly lifts, revealing a sky painted in pale pinks and sleepy blues. It feels like the world is exhaling with you, as if the sea itself is done holding its breath. The boat drifts now, untethered but oddly purposeful, like it knows the way home without being told. Thor sits down with a grunt, planting himself cross-legged on the deck like a very large toddler who's just finished assembling a particularly complicated block tower. His shoulders, once rigid, now slump slightly, just enough for you to notice. And maybe a little thoughtful. You glance over at Loki, who is lying dramatically across a bench like a poet pretending to nap. One eye opens. If you say, That was beautiful. I will jump overboard. You close your mouth. Instead, you lean back, letting the gentle rocking of the boat do what it does best. Soothe. The salt air no longer bites. The chill has turned cozy. And there's that peculiar aftertaste of magic still lingering, faint and fizzy, like drinking carbonated stardust. Thor suddenly speaks. The serpent could have crushed us. Yup, Loki agrees. It didn't. Nope. Long pause. Why? You all fall silent again. Because that's the question, isn't it? Was it mercy? Amusement? Something older than either of those? You look at the ripples where the cauldron disappeared and feel a strange sense of relief. Not triumph. Not escape. Just relief. Like some unspoken rule was tested and, for now, still holds. Maybe, Loki finally says, it didn't see us as enemies. You glance at him. Or maybe it just appreciated the cow head. Thor nods slowly. That was a good cow. Scholars still argue, Loki adds, whether that cow was mythical, metaphorical, or just really unlucky. You chuckle despite yourself. And that's when the boat, still drifting, still quiet, bumps softly against something. Not a port, not a dock. A patch of rocky shoreline, lined with low pines and sleepy gulls. The kind of place you'd never notice on a map, but which always seems to appear right when you need it. Thor stands, stretches, and slings Mjolnir over his shoulder with a little more ease than before. His eyes scan the trees. You hop off next, feet landing on damp moss that squishes politely beneath your boots. Loki follows last, somehow dry and rumpled in that way only people who thrive on inconvenience can be. For a moment, no one speaks. You all just stand there, listening to nothing. Then Loki breaks the silence. I'm starving. Thor nods. We feast. You blink. On what? Did we bring food? Loki grins and pulls a slightly crushed packet of honey cakes from his sleeve. Emergency snacks, he says. I was saving them for the apocalypse. Thor frowns. This wasn't the apocalypse? No, just a very tense brunch. You laugh, and it feels good, easy even. Like the story's arc has settled for now. You sit on a flat rock with your honey cake, watching the sea sparkle like it has nothing to hide. In this moment, it's just water. Not a portal, not a threat, not a myth. Just water. But you know better. And so does it. The feast, such as it is, involves slightly sticky honey cakes, one very suspicious apple, and Thor tearing into a chunk of dried elk jerky he insists is aged by thunder. Loki critiques the texture while casually levitating a pine cone for no reason whatsoever. You chew your cake in silence, enjoying the odd serenity of sharing a snack with two deities on a nameless shore. Then Thor stands abruptly. You brace instinctively, assuming something large and dangerous is about to crash through the forest. Instead, he just says, I'm going for a walk. Loki blinks. Alone. Thor grunts. Thinking walk. Loki turns to you. That's new. You both watch as Thor disappears into the trees, his footsteps making the ground sound like it's holding its breath. You're about to return to your honey cake when you notice something odd. The cauldron. You blink hard. No one put it there. No sound announced its return. It's just sitting there on the moss, perfectly dry, perfectly still, and radiating that same quiet energy as before. You look at Loki. He frowns. That's not how objects behave. You circle it cautiously. There are no markings. No mist. No glowing runes. Just a slightly smug-looking pot that seems quite pleased to be here. I thought the serpent took it, you say. It did, Loki replies. And now it gave it back. Why? He shrugs. Maybe it thinks we're responsible now. Or maybe it's bored. You sigh. The cauldron hums again. This time, when you touch it, it's warm. Like it remembers something. Like it wants something. I don't like this, you mutter. Then you're finally learning, Loki says brightly. Thor returns an hour later, covered in pine needles and suspiciously quiet. He sees the cauldron. Doesn't flinch. just stares at it for a long while. Thoughts, you ask? He grunts. It stays. Here. With us. Loki raises an eyebrow. What are we supposed to do with it? Thor shrugs. Guard it. Watch it. Feed it if it starts glowing again. You glance between them. We're cauldron sitters now? Thor nods. It's important. To the serpent? To the world. You groan. So we're in charge of an ancient, possibly magical, potentially cursed piece of divine crockery? Loki pats your shoulder. Welcome to Norse mythology. Scholars still argue, he adds, whether the cauldron was a tool of power, a source of wisdom, or just a very confusing pet. That night you sleep beside it, not because you're ordered to, but because something deep inside you knows the story isn't finished. Not yet. You dream of waves. Not crashing ones, not violent or dark, just soft, rhythmic pulses like a heartbeat made of water. In the dream, you're floating in a boat made of clouds, and below you swims something enormous, ancient, and oddly polite. You think it's humming. You wake to bird song and the faint smell of moss. The cauldron is exactly where you left it, still, silent, and somehow smug despite having no facial features. Thor's gone again, probably doing chin-ups on a mountain. Loki, meanwhile, is gently poking the cauldron with a twig. Still humming, you ask? He nods. In E-flat, I think. You sit up. Do we tell someone? Odin? Freya? Literally anyone with a filing system for magical cookware. Loki shakes his head. Too late. It's chosen us. You stare. The pot chose us? Loki taps it once. Either that, or it's haunted. Pick your comfort. You decide not to pick either. Thor returns eventually with a deer slung over one shoulder and a large rock under the other arm. You don't ask. It feels safer not to. He drops both beside the fire pit and announces, "We're moving." You blink. Where? Thor gestures vaguely. A clearing. Good for watching. Watching what? He doesn't answer. Which, in Thor speak, means everything. You pack up your things and somehow, you end up carrying the cauldron. Not because anyone asked you to, but because when you tried to not carry it, it made a faint whining sound like a disappointed sheep. Loki smirks the entire hike. The clearing is peaceful. A gentle slope overlooks the fjord. The wind carries the smell of pine and possibility. Thor sets the cauldron in the center like he's establishing a shrine. You sit cross-legged, waiting for someone to declare what happens next. Instead, you get Odin. Well, sort of a raven. It lands silently beside the cauldron, looks at you, then at Thor, then at Loki, and finally at the cauldron. Then it caws once and flies away. That's one of his, Loki mutters. He knows. You all stare at the sky for a long time. What do we do now? You finally ask. Thor doesn't speak. He just closes his eyes and listens to the wind. Loki lies back in the grass. Now we wait. Until the next myth finds us. You laugh softly. Because of course it will. Scholars still argue, Loki adds, eyes closed, whether the myths shape us, or we just stumble into them because we're bored. The cauldron hums again, gently this time. You feel it through your fingertips, low and comforting, like the sound of rain on a roof when you're already in bed. And you realize, this isn't a relic. It's a promise. Of something returning. Of something continuing. Of something that may never truly end. Days pass. Or maybe it's been weeks. Time has become syrupy and strange, bending around routines that feel both ancient and oddly relaxing. Each morning, you wake in the clearing to the sound of wind in pine branches and Thor sharpening his axe against a boulder that may or may not be sentient. Loki, of course, does very little unless there's a dramatic opportunity to be noticed. The cauldron remains. Always centered. Always still. But you swear it's watching you. Sometimes, you hear faint sounds when you lean close. Not voices exactly, more like memories having polite conversations in another room. One morning, the cauldron smells faintly of cinnamon. Loki sniffs. Either it's learning recipes or trying to manipulate us emotionally. Thor pokes it with a stick. What's cinnamon? You sigh. But later that afternoon, something changes. A traveler appears. Old, hunched, wrapped in a cloak the color of old bark. He says nothing, just walks into the clearing, nods to the cauldron, and sits down cross-legged beside it. You all stare. Thor grunts. Friend of yours? Loki squints. Maybe. Or a long-lost cousin. Or a wizard trapped in the shape of a man. Or Tuesday. You approach carefully. The traveler's eyes are closed. His breathing slow. His hands rest gently on his knees. Hours pass. He does not move. Then, without warning, he speaks. It has accepted its guardians. You freeze. Thor tilts his head. The cauldron? The traveler nods once. It remembers when it was stolen. It remembers the ocean. It remembers the silence between storms. Loki raises an eyebrow. Well, that's cryptic. The traveler smiles. It will sleep now. But only because it trusts you. You blink. Wait, it was awake this whole time? Another nod. It waits. It listens. It brews. Brews what, you ask? The traveler simply points to the cauldron and says, when it's time, you'll know. Then, as quietly as he arrived, he rises and walks into the woods, vanishing like fog in sun. You sit in stunned silence. Then Loki claps once. Well, that was definitely Tuesday. Thor walks over to the cauldron, places one hand on its rim, and says softly, we'll wait. You don't question it anymore. Whatever the cauldron is, weapon, beacon, memory, it's part of your story now. And it seems you're part of its. Scholars still argue, Loki mutters, whether the traveler was a messenger, a ghost, or just a guy who really likes soup. That night, the cauldron hums again. Not the sound of tension or warning, but of something steeping, something growing, something coming. The morning mist curls around your ankles like a sleepy cat, and the cauldron, for once, is completely quiet. No hums, no glow, no mysterious smells of clove or stardust pancakes. Just stillness. Thor sits nearby, tossing pine cones at a boulder like it insulted his honor. He misses every throw, but looks satisfied anyway. Loki, for lack of better hobbies, is teaching a beetle how to juggle. The beetle, to its credit, seems moderately interested. You, however, can't shake the feeling. That low buzz in your chest. Not from fear, but from expectation. Like you're standing on a shoreline, waiting for a ship that may or may not exist. And then, the raven returns. Not one of Odin's usual sleek black ones. This one is gray, a little scruffy, and dragging something in its beak. It drops it in front of you. A single thread of golden twine. You blink. What is this? Loki picks it up, turns it in the light. That, he says, is destiny. Or dental floss. Hard to say at this stage. Thor steps forward and holds out his palm. The thread coils into it like it recognizes him. He studies it. And for once, Thor doesn't say anything dramatic. He just nods slowly. Loki peers over his shoulder. Is that from the rope you used to fish the serpent? You both look at Thor. He shrugs. Could be. You frown. Did it return it? Thor doesn't answer directly. Instead, he walks to the cauldron and drops the thread inside. Nothing happens. For a moment, a soft puff like a sigh. The cauldron glows faintly at its base, pulsing warm gold. It doesn't heat up. It doesn't rattle. It just accepts. And in that moment, you feel something pass through you. Memory maybe. Of thunder underwater. Of ropes soaked in silence. Of something ancient deciding to trust something loud and foolish and hopeful. The cauldron settles again. No more glow. No more sound. Just presence. Scholars still argue, Loki whispers, whether the cauldron was ever just a pot, or if it's been waiting, century after century, for that one lost thread to return. You sit down beside it, not because it asks, but because you understand now, this isn't a tale about battles or glory. It's about continuity, the idea that something lost can still come home, that a thread, no matter how thin, can reconnect worlds, that even thunder gods need reminders that not everything must be broken to be understood. And somewhere, deep in the sea, you imagine the serpent watching again. Not with suspicion, but with recognition. Because some stories don't end. They look like rings, like coils. It's dusk again. The kind of dusk that doesn't make a big deal of itself, just slips in quietly, dimming the world by degrees, like someone gently turning down a lantern. The fire crackles. The cauldron sits in its usual place, content and quiet. Thor snores under a tree, occasionally muttering words like snake and stew in his sleep. Loki is attempting to toast pine needles over the fire, claiming it's an acquired flavor. You sit nearby, eyes half closed, watching the sky change color. Everything feels balanced. Not resolved. Not finished. But at peace. You rise, walk slowly to the cauldron, and place your palm on its rim. It hums, just once, like a soft breath in a cold room. You don't know what it means. But you don't need to. Some things just are. Behind you, Loki says, you know, for a pot that's seen the bottom of the ocean and the inside of a god's boat, it's holding up remarkably well. You chuckle. Thor stirs and mumbles something about not losing the cow head next time, then rolls over and goes right back to sleep. Loki flops onto the grass beside you, gazing up at the stars. So, he says, what's next? You think about it. About serpents who pause instead of striking. About cauldrons that remember. About threads that find their way back after lifetimes. I don't know, you say honestly. And for once, that answer feels perfectly fine. You all sit in silence. The stars blink quietly above. And somewhere, out there, beneath miles of ocean and myth, Jormungandr sleeps. Not defeated. Not forgotten. Just resting. Like you. Like the world. Like the story. Because it doesn't need to end. Not tonight. Not yet. And as the night stretches gently across the sky, the cauldron hums again, low, warm, steady. Like a lullaby written in thunder. Like the promise of another story. Someday. So now, with the sea quiet and the sky dim, you can finally rest. There's nothing left to chase. No serpents to wrestle. No ropes to pull, no gods to follow, no cauldrons to carry. Only you. Right here. So, the pine trees sway gently in the breeze, their needles rustling like whispers from a dream. The fire has faded to coals now, soft orange glows pulsing like a heartbeat, slow and safe. And the boat? You barely remember it. Just a memory of wood and wave, drifting through fog toward something ancient. You lie back in the grass, arms folded under your head. A raven calls once in the distance. Not a warning, just a note. A punctuation mark at the end of a long, winding sentence. Above you, stars form stories of their own. Lines connecting moments. Loops curling through time. Like thread, like fate. And in your chest, where the tension used to live, there's only quiet now. Not empty, settled. Like a cup that's no longer shaking. Like a tide that finally came home. So breathe. Let the calm wrap around you. Let the warmth of the myth hold your edges. Let the hum of the world cradle you, not loud, not sharp, just there. Steady, gentle. Sleep now. You've earned it.